Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks to all of you for joining us on today's Intersection webinar. This is a special edition for us. Those of you who have joined us before know that we at the Hunt Institute typically host this webinar twice a month. And today we're so excited to continue highlighting some of the great work we're seeing take place around the country as educators come together to support our students and families in light of the current COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Allison Goff, and I'm a policy analyst with the Hunt Institute. And again, we're so glad to have all of you join us today. Today, we're going to hear from three incredible educators from across the country to share their perspectives on how they're supporting students and families right now. We're going to have about 30 to 35 minutes of conversation with them, and then we'll have time for some Q&A. If you have questions that you would like us to share with the educators, please enter those into the chat box or using the Q&A feature through WebEx, and we'll work to moderate that conversation with them. To get things started, we're going to start with the 2019 Missouri State Teacher of the Year, Shelly Parks. Shelly is a high school English teacher at Francis Howell North High School in St. Charles, Missouri. Shelly, thanks so much for making time to join us today. Would love to hear a little more about your school and some of the ways that you and your colleagues have worked to meet student needs during these recent school closures.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for asking me today. I really am grateful to be able to have this conversation. So I'm at a high school that's about 1,700 students. Our district is about 19,000 students. And I'm just outside of St. Louis, so a suburb in St. Charles. And, you know, just like the rest of the world, I feel like we are figuring this out as we go and just trying to put students at the forefront and doing our best for them. And so, you know, when it comes to meeting physical needs, we have made sure our families and our students have the food that they need. We have given access to hotspots and devices to our oldest learners and our youngest learners. We've made sure that they have either a device or packets. We've tried to stay connected in many ways that I know we'll continue to talk about, but and then making sure that we're providing quality learning opportunities that look really different from the opportunities that kids had in our classroom, but keeping our focus on kids and their social emotional health, but also giving them academic learning opportunities to make sure that they still have those advantages.
Great, thank you so much. I'm now so excited to welcome Jenny OMeara. Jenny is the principal of Phillips Middle School here in Brattleboro, North Carolina. And Jenny would also love for you to tell us a little about Phillips Middle and how you and your team have worked to meet student needs over these last several weeks.
Sure thing. Thank you so much for having me. Also, just want to send out love and prayer to all the families who are experiencing difficulties during this challenging time. So Phillips is a small, low-income rural school in Edgecombe County in eastern North Carolina. About 90% of our students are students of color, all of whom identify as Black, Latinx, or multiracial. We're a very, very small 6 through 8 school, but we serve a large geographical area that we call the North Side. And the North Side is just an incredible place. Our community has really strong rural values, just a deep commitment to place and to one another, and a very rich history. Unlike Shelly, we have a very small district. We've got about 6,000 kids in our entire district. And so that kind of shows you the scale of where we are. So Phillips, I'll talk a little bit about Phillips first and what we've been up to, and then I'll shift to how we've transitioned to remote learning. But for the past 3 years, we've really been on this journey that's culminated in a deep commitment to redesign and reimagine education and how we do school. We say Phillips is the perfect place to learn and experience love and belonging. And so every decision we make comes from that. We also strive towards that mission, recognizing that the industrial model of education just does not work for every single kid. And it certainly wasn't designed for every single kid, certainly not kids who look like ours. And so we keep equity at the root of all we do. And we know that if we want different outcomes for our kids, we're going to have to start doing things very differently. And so we're really thinking and rethinking how we do school with students at the center and with student voice at the center of every learning experience we design. And so, we've used a couple different tools to do that. We use human-centered and equity-centered design thinking, and then we also use the science of learning and future trends. And so that human-centered and equity-centered piece has been really important for us because we're really committed to designing with our kids and with our community and not for them. And then, of course, we want to be rooted in the science of learning and in future trends because we want to make sure that we're preparing our kids for the futures that they're dreaming of. And so we feel like we've had this ability to innovate so much at Phillips because Edgecombe County Public Schools has made this commitment to innovation and really doing things differently. And I think it's for that reason that we were able to quickly adapt to meeting student needs remotely on March 14th when our governor issued the decision that we would no longer be in school. Our district did a tremendous job in providing free breakfast and lunch to all students. We've been running bus routes and actually bringing food to families. Like I said, we cover a large geographical area, and so not all families can get to our schools, so instead we're bringing meals to them. And of course, we're practicing social distancing and safety measures there. Our teachers also pivoted very quickly to designing remote learning experiences for students through both Google Classroom and through remote learning packets. Not all of our students have access to internet or cell phone service because of our geography and our location and broadband access at this time. And so we've had to be really intentional in how we're designing learning experiences for kids who don't have those because we want them to have access to valuable learning right now, just as much as someone who has internet. I think the thing that's been most astonishing to me about this transition is that our mission has really remained the same, and everything we've done for the past few years has sort of prepared us for this moment. It's just the context is different now, right? And so for 2 years, many of our teachers have been flexing their own design muscles. They've been taking risks in the classroom and learning from them. They've been growing in their own ability to make and deliver new learning experiences to kids. And as a result, they were able to be really flexible in this transition. Fortunately, most of our teachers have also chosen to use Google Classroom and other tools like that to deliver learning experiences in the building. And so they're able to continue to use those same tools out of the building. I think I got to pause real quickly too, because our teachers have just been like amazing. And one thing we really value at Phillips and on the north side is affirming one another. Because if we don't affirm ourselves, I don't know who else is going to. So I got to shout out the entire Phillips staff and all the Edgecombe County staff. Our teachers have just been so committed to our kids, and they see our kids and they see their unique differences, and then they design learning experiences to make sure that every single one of them is getting exactly what they need and deserve. And so shout out to all my Bulldogs out there. I guess I'll just finish by saying that like this has not been an easy transition, but one thing I'm really proud of is that our team has really kept students at the center of everything we're doing. And that was our mission before, and that continues to be our mission now. And I'm just really grateful for the chance to learn more with my team throughout this time.
Great, thank you so much, Jenny. And now I'm so excited also to introduce Dr. John B. Gordon III. Dr. Gordon is the Superintendent of Suffolk Public Schools in Suffolk, Virginia. And Dr. Gordon would love for you to tell us about how your district is working currently to support student needs right now.
Yeah, this has been a challenge. And, you know, to echo some of the things that both Jenny and Shelly said, you know, this isn't in the book, in any book that any of us have ever studied, but, you know, you really had to be able to make some tough choices, and we kind of broke things up into phases. You know, Suffolk, we have about 14,000 students, 55% African American, and it's in Western Tidewater, about 30 minutes or so from Virginia Beach. And so we kind of get a little bit of everything. We really have a large rural area of our school division, as well as the downtown and inner city part. And so you have to be able to try to be as flexible as you can to meet the needs of everyone. And we broke things up into phases where when the announcement came down for us, and the first thing that we have to think about is the overall response to public safety. You know, that was basically phase one, while you're also thinking about, you know, your continuity of services. You kind of move into phase two. That includes making sure your bills are being paid, getting the mail, and developing instructional packets. We did instructional packets for students in grades K through 5 because Suffolk, we didn't have a one-to-one initiative for our elementary grades, and we actually had one for secondary, but until I got there in October, the students weren't allowed to take their devices home. So one of my first initiatives was our SDS Connect initiative, which allowed our students to be able to take their Chromebooks home, and it ended up being, you know, a godsend. Today is actually my 6-month anniversary of being, you know, on the job, and we've been learning a little bit on the fly on some things that we were able to do. And we kind of focused at the elementary level with really focusing on mastery for the 24 weeks that they were in school. And just really starting this Monday coming up, April 20th, is when our secondary students in grades 6 through 12 will be able to learn new material. And we had to try to find some incentives to be able to get them to do that. So we just kind of finalized a pass-fail system. However, we wanted to make sure that our passing grades were going to be an A, and the failing grades, right now would be an F, but we will also give the students an opportunity to finish it up, over the summer, even though none of us know if summer school is going to actually be able to happen. But we also had to reconfigure our grading system. For the elementary students, there won't be a fourth 9 weeks based on the inability, again, to not be able to teach new material. So each of the first 3 9 weeks is going to count 33% each. And in the secondary level, even though we're using pass-fail and an A or an F, we kind of want to minimize that percentage to 10% for the fourth 9 weeks for secondary students because, as my colleagues have said, there is no duplication, there is no substitution for students actually having a teacher in front of them. So, even though we have all studied models of having the teacher serve more as the facilitator, you still want to try to be able to be as fair for that time that the kids were physically in school. So we want to give a larger percentage to that. And for, for all of our listeners out there, one of the things that we definitely want to provide advice on is there is no one way to solve this. You really have to be able to look at things from a magnitude of solutions and add as many as you possibly can. So besides us teaching new material here in the spring, we will also are in the process right now revising our curriculum maps, revising our lesson plans, revising our pacing guides so we can incorporate a lot of the new knowledge and material that was supposed to have been taught in the fourth 9 weeks at the beginning of next school year. So, we just had a school board meeting on this last week where our board approved our grading plan. We've gotten good positive feedback from our school community. And now it's just really trying to continue to provide as much support as we can to our students and to their families. Part of the reason why we decided to use the Google Classroom, as was just mentioned, but also to use Edgenuity for our secondary classes, is we thought it was going to be very, very difficult for our teachers to be able to provide lesson plans, determining a time that the entire class can meet, also provide the office hours. I requested that our teachers do at least 1 hour in the AM, at least 1 hour in the PM, depending on the schedules, while still also homeschooling their own children. I mean, sometimes that's the part that's forgotten a lot, that, teachers have to be able to do their own family responsibilities and their own kids as well. So take a little bit of the burden off the teachers, provide some incentive to the students. That was one of our chief goals for Suffolk Public Schools.
Thank you so much, and that teed up nicely. I appreciate you diving in a little more intentionally into the conversation about instruction, and I want to talk a little more about that now. Every state has different guidance and how they're approaching student learning right now, and would love to hear more from each of you about how you're approaching some new instructional methods from your specific perspective. So Shelly, I'll start with you. What specific challenges have you seen teachers face as they've made this transition to distance learning? And are there some best practices that you've found that have worked well for your fellow teachers?
Sure. So, as teachers, obviously, we're dedicated to student learning. And so one of the challenges, quite honestly, has been telling ourselves to scale back and reminding ourselves that we're not going to get in all of the standards that we anticipated in fourth quarter and things like that. But when I hear both Jenny and John speak, I think one of the best things as a teacher that we can hear is grace from our school leaders. And school leaders have been phenomenal. I've been so impressed, and teachers have been so grateful for that. So it's nice to hear from leaders that element of grace for teachers. Another challenge as a teacher is that teachers teach because we love students. And so that energy and the excitement that they give us has been pushed to a screen. And so, we're left with the parts of the job that take the energy, but we don't have the people who give us the energy. And so sort of reshaping what that looks like, which is why probably you've seen so many teachers so excited about Zoom class calls, because they're seeing their kids. They're seeing their kids' faces. And that is what gives teachers energy. Another challenge, is of course for the tech-savvy. There were tech-savvy teachers before, but there were some who weren't as comfortable, and so that's been a challenge. But in my building, we have a tech specialist who's been working just overtime, and so that's a luxury, I know, but something that we've been able to do. Another challenge, I think, is the idea that teachers don't just want to assign work, but still want to teach. And so figuring out those asynchronous learning options for students, because obviously synchronous learning is not equitable for kids who have families who are sharing one device amongst multiple children and parents who are working. And so figuring out how to give those opportunities in an asynchronous fashion through recording ourselves, Zoom, and things like that, but safely to do that. And then I think probably the biggest challenge of all, most teachers would say, is just worrying about our kids. So we know some have it rough at home, and we know that there are some that we simply can't get a hold of. And I know in Missouri, our hotline calls have gone down significantly. We rely on teachers to do so much of that noticing and reporting, and so it's heartbreaking. We miss our kids, but we want to make sure that they're safe and taken care of too. And so the partnerships that we've been able to create with our principals and with our counseling team and reaching out in all different ways to try to get a hold of those kids has been a best practice as well.
Thank you so much. We know that whole child matters and whole families matter, and so I appreciate you raising that feedback. Jenny, from your perspective as a principal, would love to hear about ways in which you're supporting your teachers in planning and executing distance learning strategies, especially to the point Shelly just made, when some of them may not have had extensive training in online learning and teaching. And I know you said you all have been exercising a lot of flexibility over the last couple of years to prepare them for that, but in what ways have you been able to support planning for your teachers?
Sure. I think the first thing I learned very quickly was that I needed to support teachers first as people and then as professionals. So I know that Shelly alluded to this idea of grace, but and Dr. Gordon mentioned that we've got parents at home who have their own children they're trying to teach too, and so really quickly we learned that we needed to check in with everybody and just be there as someone they can talk to and bounce ideas off of. And so we committed to doing weekly staff huddles that were solely focused on connecting with one another. So I always sent out a newsletter every week as a principal. Before this happened, I still do that now. And so things that teachers need to know are in that newsletter. They're smart people, they read it, they get it done. So our huddles are about connecting. And so we do a lot of circle work at our school. And so our huddles are like virtual circles. So we pitch a question and we all connect with each other and make eye contact and just know that we're still part of a community deeply committed to our kids, because I do think the initial reaction, at least for me personally, was grieving. Similar to Shelly, you get your energy from being around kids when you're an educator, and when you're not, all of a sudden it's challenging. And so I knew quickly we needed to connect with one another, and that it was my job, my AP's job, to create that space for our teachers to do that. We also decided early on, I just can't preach how great teachers are enough, and so I just knew early on too, we needed to learn from what they were doing. My teachers didn't look to us for guidance other than we said, here's some systems, here are the expectations. And they were like, all right, let's go. And so then I realized a big part of my job now is to help them share the work that they're doing to make remote learning work with their kids. And so we're just creating vehicles for them to do that. And so we're still doing virtual PLCs each week. And those are mainly about just checking in on kids first and making sure that every kid is being contacted at least twice a week. But also on saying to teachers Miss Jordan did this really interesting thing. Miss Jordan, will you share that out with everybody else? Or Miss Rayner decided to do a hyperdoc to make sure every kid had access asynchronously, like Shelly was talking about, and giving them that space to share with each other and borrow each other's ideas. And I really always said the best teachers in the world are great thieves, and they steal from one another and then take it and make it work for them in their context. And so we're just continuing to do that work right now. I think the other things that I've been trying to do is just expose teachers to new tools and new ideas. In my newsletter each week we highlight something, but we've also included a self-care section in there. I just think it's so important to tell teachers hey, it's okay to turn off your computer for 30 minutes and go for a walk in the middle of the day right now, because you are a human being, and if we want you to maximize your effectiveness for our kids right now, we need you to do that. That's probably better than you designing another lesson right now. Because that lesson might not be as good right now as if you go, as it will be after you go for that walk, And so just really giving them permission to find a new normal that works for them and maximizes their effectiveness. I think the last thing that we're doing really well is giving teachers permission to take risks and really learn from this moment. So we actually have a Google Drive folder where everyone's capturing their own reflections every single day. And we're using these reflections to really learn about like, what does this moment mean for us? And then how do we use this to design and inform our design moving forward? And it seems really important. I mean, this is a historic moment. We've got to capture as much as we can right now. And we've got to learn as much as we can right now to make sure that we are like designing the school that our kids need and deserve one day. And so, having spaces like that, I think, has been really important for teachers to reflect each day, take those risks, reflect some more, learn from one another, make mistakes right now, and just continue to grow. And so I think that that's been the most important piece. But from that, like, we've got some teachers doing some cool stuff. Like, one of our teachers has been doing design challenges on Instagram, so she'll model it, and then kids will do it and post their own things. We have one teacher who's been very mindful of like the emotional well-being of kids, and she's an ELA teacher, so she just designed a unit called the Happiness Unit. And so it includes lots of reading, but it also includes lots of go outside and do something that makes you feel joyful right now. So just giving teachers the time and space to try new things and learn together has been the most important part of my job, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Dr. Gordon, pivoting to you from your perspective as a superintendent, you have the unique challenge of trying to serve kindergartners while also serving students who are ready to graduate high school in the next couple of months. And so would love for you to talk a little more about ways that you are helping your teams across the district differentiate their learning and guidance and lessons for students from kindergarten all the way through 12th.
Yeah, that's always going to be a challenge, because differentiating instruction sometimes can even be a challenge when you're physically in the classroom. One of the things that I really give a lot of kudos to our Department of Education is they share some information with us when it compares learning loss that normally would happen over the summer versus the learning loss that actually is going to probably happen to some of our students now, since the majority of school divisions across the country got out sometime in March. And kindergarten level, could potentially see a loss of 5 to 10% between getting out of school in March and potentially returning to school in late August or September, to the point where you're actually looking at how much knowledge is lost as if the kids would only have been in school for a month this entire year. I mean, that age level of 5 through 6 is also really important. So one of the things that our team has really talked about is, okay, not only are we going to revise these lesson plans, these curriculum maps, but what other supplemental resources can be potentially sent to our students at the end of the summer to kind of get them ready to roll as they're entering first grade, or to reinforce some of that knowledge and even that social learning piece, social emotional learning, and just how to be a student is going to be really important. And depending on when all of us are allowed to go back to school, we're actually even looking at, all right, maybe we need to go ahead and expand our SPS Connect initiative further down to our elementary level. We already had a plan to do 5th grade next year, but now we're probably going to do 4th grade as well. And if we begin to look at, kindergarten through 3rd grade, my director of technology probably doesn't want to hear this, but we really need to start purchasing some iPads because of the educational apps that Apple actually offers. Our research has already shown there's a little bit more visually stimulating. Kids tend to grasp their information more, and you're also going to get a great opportunity to teach them some early technological skills. So, we really think that's important. Besides giving our parents some tutorial lessons on some of these things, we made one small mistake of being under the assumption that even at the kindergarten level or even 3rd or 5th grade level at the elementary, that parents were going to know the answers to some of the instructional packets that we were sending home. And one of the things that we quickly had to realize is, number one, you never know how long someone's been out of school, but at the same time, the overall educational level that might be at home. And parents were more concerned about making sure that they were getting information right. So we then had to follow up by sending answer keys or posting answer keys. And, some of the great things that Jenny had shared about teachers wanting to teach and your ability to be able to collaborate, I really like what she said about being able to give that break, because we try to tell our parents, and even in some of my, individual sessions, you need to make sure that you build in breaks of reflection for yourself, if it's kindergarten, 1st or 2nd grade, but also for the student, because you want them to be able to process whatever learning or whatever reinforcement activity just occurred. And that did include making sure that there was some physical activity that was happening every day as well. You remember how it is as an elementary school student. Recess is a great motivator for so many things. So that needed to be built into the normal routines that were happening at the elementary level. at the kindergarten level, usually an hour or two after they eat. And just to make sure that during that time frame, at the end of the day, you can try to find some type of way to summarize what was learned and whatever they didn't really grasp. That can kind of be your opening activity for the next day. So there was some consistency in what we saw at the elementary level, but the kindergarten level especially, you know, word formation, word recognition, working on your letters, things of that nature, and the foundational aspects of math we thought were going to be really important, since reading and math are going to be not only our federal accountability pieces for later on in life, but also because they were cross-curricular, so there were so many different subjects.
Great, thank you for that. It's a lot to think about how we teach 5-year-olds and also teach 18-year-olds, so thank you for reflecting on that. I want to pivot now from instruction to talk a little more about ways that we're supporting students, and you all have already touched on that, but Shelly, you know, we know that social connections that take place at school are so important for our students, and so are there ways that you as a teacher or other teachers in your school or district have worked to meet those social emotional needs and really give students some of those social interactions and moments to engage with each other?
Yeah, so Jenny was saying that their district participates in circles, and we do too, from the elementary level to our high school level. And so we typically do that, you know, daily at the elementary level and weekly at the high school level, but still spending time in virtual circles, checking in with each other, sharing goals, processing has been really important. And our counselors will jump in on those classroom circles so they can pay attention to student needs and see what's going on. Also finding ways to stay connected. And so that has looked different, but my entire district put on a virtual spirit week. And so everybody from, you know, bus drivers to cafe aides to parents to teachers to alumni who used to be in our district, we're all dressing the same, using the same hashtag, just feeling connected in ways like that. And then we're really trying to still make our students feel special. And so teachers are making videos to send to our school on through social media platforms and things like that, just to tell them we love and miss them. Our students, our high school students the other day made one back for us, which was really special. And so things like that. The other thing, though, that we are doing that our district just switched to is a 4-day school week. And so just paying attention to the mental health, to our parent and student cries for and just to ease up a little bit. And so from now on Mondays, it will be a teacher meeting day where people will meet with their professional learning communities, departments, school-wide, district-wide meetings. And then students will be learning and teachers will be focused on student learning Tuesdays through Fridays. And so that's been a shift too, but our students told us that they needed that. And so trying to listen and take their needs into consideration has been really important.
That sounds amazing. And Jenny, you talked a lot about ways that you all are working to capture some of the innovation that you're seeing during this time. And I'm really curious, as you look ahead to returning to school at some point, what you think might have changed, you know, through some of this creativity. What are some things that you think you'll continue or utilize or expand on when students are back together with teachers in the building?
Yeah, gosh, I don't know what we're going to do yet, but I know that we're going to continue our mission of doing things differently with kids at the center. So like shout out to Shelly's district for putting student voice first and listening to kids. And like that's what we're going to keep doing no matter what. Like if we continue remote learning, like kids' voice is number one, right? But I am thinking about, you know, a lot about the gift of time and space that we're getting from this crisis to a certain extent, and how it's giving us the space to be more mindful and intentional in the choices we're making now. And then I think that opens the door for us to be more intentional in the choices we're making moving forward, right? No, whether we're in the building or not. The pull to the status quo when you're in a traditional school building every day is very strong, right? There's always a fire to be put out. If I wanted to be just the type of principal to like run around and solve problems all day long, I could easily find 10 hours of that work every single day, like easily, but it would never push the school forward. Right? And I think the same goes for teachers, right? As a teacher, it's really easy to spend your planning period solving problems or you know, finding some, like a kid who needs you and finding a fire. And then we miss out on this idea of like, well, what are we doing to move forward and push our mission forward? And make student-centered learning experiences that are actually student-centered and learning and redesigning and so on and so forth. And so I think like that might need to be the biggest lesson of this time. And so what I've been noticing, at least for my Phillips staff, is that the biggest difference in the way we're working now is we're making much more intentional decisions in how we're spending our time together and what we're doing. And so like a couple examples of that, right now I'm meeting 3 hours a week with the North Phillips School of Innovation leadership team to get clearer on our model so that we can distribute more leadership in designing and honing it. If we were still physically in school, I don't think we'd have 3 hours every week to do that, because there'd be, you know, discipline to take care of and lunch duty to do and bus duty to do and all these other things that have to happen are important. But now we have the time, so we might as well take advantage of it right now. I also have my instructional leadership team right now conducting empathy interviews with kids. So empathy interviews, for those who aren't aware of them, is just a tool that designers tend to use to make sure that they're designing with their user. And so I've actually trained my entire instructional leadership team on how to conduct empathy interviews, and everyone's reached out to 2 kids, and we decided to choose 1 kid for whom it seemed like school currently, as it is designed, is working, and 1 kid for whom it seems that school might not be working as well. And we are learning tons by doing this and listening to our kids, and we're going to be looking at now, how do we use insights from these empathy interviews to inform our design when we do go back to school and when we do reopen. The last thing that we're doing is really thinking, being much more thoughtful in how we're creating our teams and what that collaboration looks like. Like, it's so easy for teachers to become siloed. Like, I know that we say that a lot in education, but it's just the way that schedules are currently designed. It's really easy for teachers to meet once a week in their PLCs and then go back to their classrooms and continue to do their own thing. And so I'm thinking more now about how do we create spaces where teachers are like truly high functioning teams that are committed to serving the same groups of kids, particularly at the middle grades level where they do serve the same grade of kids. And so, and it's like one way we're taking a step towards that now is we're doing Enneagrams with our 6-7 team, because we realize the work that they're going to have to do when we go back is going to be so much deeper together. So we better spend this time making sure that they're connected, that they understand themselves more deeply, and that they understand each other more deeply. Because when we get back, I want them to be the most like phenomenal collaborative team that ever was in any school, because that's what it takes to do something different. And that work is tough, and it requires really leaning into each other. And I just think at the end of the day, it's just about, you know, really moving this mission forward of reimagining school with kids at the center, no matter what we do.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And similarly, Dr. Gordon, would love to think about kind of big picture, long term, where we might be headed. I know that you recently published a book entitled The Teacher's Lounge, The Real Roles of Educators in Your Schools, where you touch on pop culture and politics and real life experiences and ways that those have shaped our education landscape. Talk a little bit about how you think this current COVID-19 pandemic is going to further shape our current educational landscape as we look ahead to the next several years.
Oh yeah, you know, I really think it's going to change everything, because this is something that no one could ever have predicted. And so we really need to find multiple solutions to any educational barriers. You know, I heard my colleagues talk about equity, which should be the lens we look through for every decision. But we also need to make sure that we understand that the reinforcement that we're looking for from our teachers at home, or our home educators, I like to call them, is going to be so imperative and so important right now. And we all remember where we were when 9/11 happened. We all remember where we were when Columbine happened. I mean, these different types of things that were tragedies, this is a tragedy that is occurring right now. And, you know, even though it's a pandemic, it begins to hit home when it's someone that you know, someone that you work with, a student, unfortunately, you know, those types of things when they're affected. So we have to make sure that we're as proactive as we can. You know, I really liked what Jenny said. I'm still in that idea about those empathy interviews. That was actually when I wrote that one down. You know, we need to make sure that we are doing whatever we can. And, you know, in my book, one of the things I talk about is how, you know, music has influenced education, how we're always trying to make things as relevant as we possibly can. Just think about all the different resources and activities that will come out of this, where we can hopefully have more collaboration from kids. It increases the communication and collaboration between the teacher and student when they're not in the classroom. I mean, when you really think about it, in some cases, a lot of our educators are actually working more hours now than what they were when we were physically in school. And it's not about checking the box to see how many Zoom meetings you can actually have or how many Google Hangouts you can actually have, but actually what the product is, what are your deliverables at the end. And I think that's going to be the way we need to really begin to look at education. I mean, the hybrid model of education with technology and other things has happened, and people have been talking about that for a very, very long period of time. But now that we actually need to put it into play more, make it an action item because of the limits and barriers that we have, I think it's going to be something that we all need to understand and that we all need to be able to do as we move forward. It's not just going to be in purchasing more laptops or like Jenny said, from our rural families out there, we got 500, Khajiit devices or hotspots as well to be able to support them because of the limited broadband they may have. We need to really start believing and thinking about worst case scenario. And when we're talking about equity, it really is all about removing those barriers. And what other barriers are there to education? Now, there is one huge positive that has come out of this. People now have a greater respect and understanding for what teachers do each and every day. And you may have seen a lot of the jokes and social media memes and gifs that are out there where people are suspending their own kids or sending them to in school, those types of things, because they're really seeing potentially some of the challenges that teachers may have seen, and they are also realizing that being a teacher, being an educator is not easy. I mean, we always talk about the career switchers that always believe they can come into the educational field, which is fine, but why is it that all of a sudden people believe that it was easier to become an educator than it was to become a mechanic or a doctor or whatever? We're the only field in the world where a lot of folks, they were bigger experts than us. I mean, you do not go into a doctor's office and question and say, no, I don't agree with that diagnosis because I read in D. But in education, that seemed to be the case a lot, where people were questioning strategies, questioning things that research had already proven to work, especially with us all trying to close those achievement gaps. And now, we're looking at them as opportunity gaps. So I think there is a greater respect for all educators all throughout the world. I think there's a greater respect for the teachers and the work that they do, especially when it comes to making sure that the material that may not have been as easily grasped the first time, what different strategies can we come up with the second time around to get those kids really understanding it who didn't understand it the first time? That's one benefit. People really understand the importance of education in our day-to-day lives right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think all of you are three shining examples of the incredible work that is taking place in every school and every district across the country right now. And so thanks to you, but also thanks to all of the teachers and school and district leaders who are working so hard for their students and families right now. We have now about 5 or 10 minutes for questions. Thanks so much to those of you who have been chatting questions in already. I'm going to start working through those, but please feel free to push some other questions in. Jenny, the first question is for you. You mentioned that all of your district, I guess, is very rural. So the question is related to how you're supporting student learning and what content you're providing to students who may not have internet access.
Yeah, that's such a great question. So we are currently distributing learning packets and doing online learning. And what I've asked teachers to do is design learning experiences both virtually and in packet form that are pretty aligned so that no matter what, kids are getting the same experiences right now. And so we use our bus routes to deliver those packets. Fortunately, we're at a place right now where we know very clearly which students need packets, and so we can guarantee that they're getting them. And then what we're doing is we have teachers, our counselors, our EC teachers, our special ed teachers, even my bookkeeper is helping out. Like, we have teachers calling the students who are doing the learning via packets to make sure that they're learning and getting what they need. Even my athletic director reached out to a kid we just could not get in touch with, and finally he got in touch and he texted me. He said, "Jamir needs help with his math. What do I do?" And I was like, "Well, email his math teacher. That's great," and give him the phone number now. And so, we're making sure that even if they're getting these packets of learning, that they're still getting adults reaching out to them so they can get support if they need it, but also so that they get these valuable learning experiences. Another piece too is, and I think Dr. Gordon mentioned something like this, we also learned the hard way that we need to include answer keys so that kids can also feel confident in their work, because we didn't want to leave them out there hanging well, I don't know if this is right, but I'm on circle B, and that's good for now. We want to make sure that kids feel really like they're getting the best that we have to offer them right now.
Great, thank you. Just had a great question come in, and I'll let you all take this as you see fit, but Dr. Gordon, we'll start with you. What state guidance or policy changes or even specific funding flexibilities have been most helpful to you during this period of closure?
Well, I think the biggest one was the waivers for graduation that came down from, Dr. James Lane, our General Assembly, and Governor Northam here in Virginia. That was the biggest fear because we had so many students who were on the senior watch list or may need one class or, one standards of learning assessment. To be able to take that anxiety away, I think was really important. And then carryover of funds, if it's going to be our federal funds through Title I or even some of our local funds that we have, being able to potentially have those in place to at least the end of this calendar year, but if not, definitely, next fiscal year, we really think it's going to be a game changer for us because you had certain deadlines where you had to spend that money. In some cases, it was June 30th. Some cases, it was September 30th. So knowing that we still going to be able to use those funds to support kids, I think is going to be really important. Still waiting on that federal stimulus money, just like every other state is, across the United States. We're supposed to receive our CALC tool a little later on this week to give us an idea of how much each locality is going to receive, and that's going to be based on how many students are free and reduced lunch, plus your overall enrollment, plus whatever other needs there may be. So we're going to try to use that money as we can to add some additional resources to be able to make up some of this lost instructional time. Again, you guys have heard me say this several times, there's not going to be one key solution. The biggest piece of advice I can give to anyone that's listening, use multiple avenues to solve any learning loss, any stress, any anxiety that we may have. Similar to Jenny, we're basically doing Shelly, a four-day work week, and Fridays are our reflection day, but that also gives us an opportunity. I have to touch base with teachers or touch base with principals because now we're getting into the aspect of you need to start hiring again. And it's going to be tough to really be able to get some quality educators in as we're preparing for next year while also having that delicate balance of closing this year out well.
Thank you. Shelly or Jenny, any feedback or thoughts on policy changes or flexibilities that may have been helpful to you already as we learn how to teach in this new environment?
Well, I think, for Missouri, Commissioner Van Deven made the announcement that state testing would not continue for this year. And so, and her statement, I'm going to paraphrase because I won't be able to quote her, but she said there is a time and a place for testing, and it's not now. And essentially, there was this collective sigh of relief from teachers and from students who felt that weight in ways that it's important and we value testing, but it's not the most important thing right now. And so that helped alleviate the need to do more and push quantity and really spend some time thinking about and focusing on quality.
Yeah, and I'll just second Shelly, and also just huge shout out to you, Dr. Gordon. I just can't even imagine all the different pieces of the puzzle you have to think about right now. But I also want to second that. I hope that state leaders are really learning from this moment without testing and learning. And, I think formative assessments matter, and knowing what kids know matters, right? But I do think that this could be a good time to learn from teachers about what it's like teaching when you don't have that in front of you, and kind of what freedoms that might offer and opportunities that it might offer.
Thank you. We have a question about competency-based learning, and Dr. Gordon, you spoke about, there are a lot of things we've been talking about for a long time that just haven't gotten over the finish line, and is this the time for us to think more critically about competency-based learning as opposed to our more traditional model of teaching and learning? And would love to hear from each of you on that if you have thoughts on that question.
Yeah, I think it is, it's a great opportunity to return to some of that because that accountability piece is off. And if we're serious about, Dr. Siddiqui, who's CEO and works with you guys at the Hunt Institute, when he was a middle school principal, he was really big on expeditionary learning. And as much as we could work on having more cross-curricular information, my whole goal when I was a principal and even now as a superintendent is what can we do to bring education to life? And when we're talking about competency-based learning, the skills the skills that can be used in multiple different subjects, the skills that can be used in whatever you do when you leave high school or your jobs, that is going to be, I think, really important and will also be a positive byproduct of this. Our kids will probably have some new skills that they'll be able to learn, and so that maybe we'll be able to get away from just the standards, but the skills themselves and then the practical applications of those skills that we can see day in and day out in the classroom and also in their real lives. I mean, we're making a big adjustment from just the community service aspect to service learning itself, which I really feel is going to really be able to bring the curriculum to life. But also you'll have a deliverable or a finished product that the community and the school itself will be able to appreciate in years to come.
Great, thank you for that. A really important question that I know we have seen across the country as we've worked to support policymakers in our work at the Hunt Institute is about how we're supporting students with disabilities who may be served with IEPs and 504 plans. Feedback from all of you about how you're reaching out and supporting those students and how we navigate that with this excitement about student-led learning, but acknowledging that that model may not fit all of our students. So I'll start with you, Jenny, if you have some thoughts on how you all have been working to support your students with disabilities.
Yeah, I think similar to before, we're just taking the work we were already doing to support our students with disabilities and now transferring that remotely. So we're, like I said, we're a really, really small school. We have one special ed teacher at my school, and her greatest gift is her ability to build relationships with students and then to get them to believe in themselves and then to scaffold work so that they can access high rigorous, standards. And so our main task right now has just been to make sure that she's talking to every one of our kids with disabilities every week. And so she's offering office hours for our kids who do have internet access. She's calling the phones of parents for our kids who don't every week. And just making sure that they're continuously getting that, not in-person support, but support from a person in our school who knows them well, knows their needs well, and can continue to work with them towards their goals and their IEPs.
Great. Shelly, any thoughts from you on how you're working to serve your students with disabilities?
Yeah, we are still continuing to have IEP meetings, 504 meetings virtually, and so families are getting together and a whole team of people and making sure that we're still continuing to offer options for our students. Our special ed teachers have incredible relationships with families, and so they're reaching out to families, figuring out needs, trying to offer a lot of social, emotional resources too. And then we also have care teams that are meeting where the kid and the parents and the whole crew of people are virtually still having meetings and conversations to try to figure out how things are going, what modifications we can continue making, and how to continue supporting students.
Great. Dr. Gordon, any district level insights into ways that you've supported your schools and your educators in serving students with disabilities?
That's probably the biggest challenge that there is realistically. I'm glad to hear Shelly and Jenny talk about the supports they put into place, because maintaining the accommodations that may have been written into an IEP plan or into a 504 is challenging. And this is where those office hours, not only from your special education teacher, your general education teacher, but also the case managers are going to be really important. And you have to make an adjustment to the material when necessary. Even when we're using Edgenuity, we've actually made some alterations to the total number of learning modules that our secondary students that have IEPs will have to complete, because we know that they needed additional time for assessments. We know that there may have been some processing challenges there. And, the feedback that we've actually gotten from special education students and their families is not only the importance of being supported, but also the importance of knowing that they can actually do the work. That's the biggest level of anxiety that you will see, not only from special education students, but any student that's going to be a self-directed learner right now. So being able to provide those supports, making some revisions to IEP plans that are out there, and then also taking a look at what any type of extended school year or anything of that nature that can really make sure that these students don't fall further behind. I mean, that's going to be a challenge that I'm sure that all school divisions are going through. But the biggest piece of advice is to make sure that you have that strong two-way communication between yourself, the student, and the parent in order to give them the potential to have as much success as possible.
Great. So we have time for just a couple more questions before we wrap up right at 2 o'clock. Something that Shelly spoke about that I'd love to hear from Jenny and Dr. Gordon on was, the fact that we do know that reports of neglect and abuse have dropped sharply across the country, but that doesn't mean that our students are safe at home right now. And so would love to hear about ways you're checking in, especially on those students who are more at risk or students who you may have been concerned about previously. So Jenny, I'll start with you on that.
Yeah, this has been a really important part of our work, of course. We talk a lot about at Phillips love and belonging and safety coming before learning. And so we focus on designing experiences to guarantee that kids have those things. So one thing we did this school year was we implemented something we called banners, which were kind of like morning meeting time, but we actually let kids choose the teacher they started their day with. It was really important to us that every kid felt like they had a deep connection with at least one adult in our building. And so we had kids actually take a survey and rate their top 3 adults in the building, and we included like everybody. I mean, my front office staff had people, every teacher had people, our dean of students took like a group of kids, and so we really tried to pair kids with an adult that we thought they would connect deeply with and that they thought they would connect deeply with. And so I think because we created that space and cultivated that culture before, kids were really comfortable now reaching out. Something else we used banner time for wasn't just circle time either, though. We used it to really develop and hone kids' like critical success skills. So early on in the year, we actually explicitly taught kids 6 through 8 how to send an email, how to reply to an email, like what that looks like. And so now we actually have kids reaching out to us. So a student emailed me, my assistant principal, and 2 teachers 2 weeks ago and literally said, "You guys are my family. I'm really struggling. Can one of you please call me?" And so the fact that in 8th grade, a 13-year-old had the wherewithal and felt safe enough to send an email to her principal and administration and teachers to say, "I need somebody right now," was really powerful. And so I know personally, I sleep at night knowing that the overwhelming majority of our kids have someone on our staff they can reach out to and they know how to get to them. That being said, we also recognize that a lot of the time we notice in the day, like we'll see a kid walk by and we'll say, "Oh, wait, something's going on right now. Come with me, what's going on today?" And that's how we really figure out what's going on. And so my school counselor and my dean of students are currently creating a plan to make sure that our more at-risk kids are getting contacted more frequently by people to make sure that they're doing well. And then we're also trying to create a system where all teachers can input anything we're learning about kids right now at this time. Because Coach Jones, who's our PE and science teacher, she's got really deep relationships with some kids. And so she's going to learn some things that those kids will never tell me, but it's important that the entire team knows about it. So we're trying to make sure that we're all communicating with one another about what's going on in the lives of every single one of our children to make sure that we can be there for them and show up for them, even in the same ways as if we had been doing it in person together.
Thank you. And Dr. Gordon, what about you all, how you're making sure you reach out to check in on those at-risk students right now?
I think this is twofold, because you also have to reach out and check in on the parents and the home educator as well, because they're seeing some different sides of their children, especially if they're constantly in the type of learning frustrations. I do these little weekly Saturday school sessions. I'm basically trying to give a lot of tips to our home educators. And one of the things I spoke about is the overall anxiety, both from the student side because of what's going on and from the parent side because of what's going on, but also taking on the role of being a home educator. And so you have to be able to try to find some incentives. You have to have those conversations, professionally at the school level. We began to not only make sure that our school counselors had office hours, but we're also bringing them back into the buildings at least one day a week starting next week. And that's not only for new enrollees, but that's also to be able to touch base, because we were sending out information on how to be able to manage stress, tips for social emotional learning, tips for managing anxiety, because anxiety is very, very prevalent right now. And just also making sure, very, very similar to what Jenny said, is those soft skills of being able to communicate with an adult. And you'd be surprised just how frequent that's needed, even from the little simple teacher sending an email to a student saying, "Hey, I know we're not in school, we miss you. We saw the caravan of cars at several of our schools. They were driving through the kids' neighborhoods." And the messages that were coming from the students themselves. We had one of our elementary students, Matthew at Northern Shores Elementary School, that released a video about how this is going on and on and on, and how he misses being with his friends. And this video's got about 5,000 views already in just a short couple of days, because so many kids are really identifying and empathizing with what he's talking about. So that two-way communication between not only the school council, but everyone in the school, we think is going to be really important. And as long as they have someone that they can talk to, that includes our parents too. As long as they can have someone they can talk to, they can get some tips and advice on. We think it, it can really make a huge difference for the long run, because we don't want any of these issues to become chronic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks so much to all three of you. I am leaving this webinar feeling a lot of hope and a lot of optimism. It is so good to hear directly from teachers and school and district leaders, and I encourage all of you on this webinar, if you have not reached out to engage a teacher, school leader in your community, please do so. They're doing incredible work right now and really are tapped into the needs of our students and families. So thank you so much to Shelly Parks, Jenny OMeara, and Dr. John Gordon III. We really appreciate you joining us today. We have recorded this webinar and we'll post it in the next couple of weeks on our Intersection blog with some high-level key takeaways from today's conversation. So feel free to check back for that and send it around to your networks for anyone who may have missed today's webinar. I also want to let you all know the Hunt Institute has been working over the last several weeks to create a number of resources spanning the education continuum from early childhood all the way through post-secondary. So we're going to push that link out in the chat now just to have those resources available to all of you. These include policy considerations at the district and also at the state level. So thanks again so much for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you back next time at the intersection. Have a great afternoon.